This video is going to be about MeSH, which stands for Medical Subject Headings, which is the form of subject headings or controlled vocabulary that is used in PubMed. So if we go to PubMed for the library's main website, click on that. If we scroll down in the lower right-hand corner, we have this Explore and then MeSH database. So if we click here, we're going to get to a database that's all made up of the MeSH headings themselves. So we'll click on this, and here we can put in a term. So we're saying, okay, this is something that we're interested in, a topic that we're interested in, and we want to see what the associated subject heading is. So here I'm going to say heart attack and do a search for that. And you'll see that what it maps to and brings up here is instead myocardial infarction. So you'll see the entry terms, there's heart attack, and there's also different variants of terms that they have all mapped to this concept of myocardial infarction. So that's a specific language and specific tag they'll be using for this subject matter. So different options that we have here. If we scroll down again, we see those entry terms, so all the different ones that map to this subject heading. And then we'll also see the sort of tree-like structure that says what are broader terms that this falls within. So myocardial ischemia, heart diseases, cardiovascular diseases, these are things higher in the hierarchy. And then below, the things that are lower, so narrower terms, so specific types, myocardial infarctions. So there's a specific type that you are interested in. You could say, actually, I want to focus on perhaps this ST elevation myocardial infarction. You could click on that instead. Sometimes it's in more than one tree, so there's more than one place that it falls, but sometimes there's only one. It'll vary. So if we scroll back up, we'll see that there's also some options in the middle here. So we have like subheadings. So here, if you're saying, okay, I'm interested in myocardial infarctions, but also I'm specifically interested in a particular aspect of it. So I'm interested maybe in the history or genetics or diet therapy. So if you're like, okay, I sort of want to narrow to the specific area, if there's something in here that is particularly useful, that can be really helpful to select. Like, veterinary, you're interested in it for a veterinary population. So you can click any of those that seem useful to you. There's this option to restrict to MeSH major topic. What that means is any given article might have a dozen or more MeSH headings associated with it. So indexers have looked at it and said, okay, these are all the MeSH headings that apply. But when you look at those, you'll notice that there's only a handful, often sort of 3 to 5, that have a star next to them or an asterisk. And what those mean are these are the ones that if you had to describe what this article is about, those are what sort of the primary descriptors of its aboutness. So there might be things that are like more peripheral, sort of descriptors like, human or different things that relate to, some aspect of it, but they're not what it's primarily about. So if you use this, you can restrict it to only the ones that appear as a asterisk major topic for that article. So you get a smaller but more focused group. And then there's also this option, do not include MeSH terms found below this term in the MeSH hierarchy. So we're just looking at the MeSH hierarchy before. So if there's some reason where you're like, you want things that are indexed on this level, but nothing lower, you can choose to make that decision. But otherwise, it defaults to including everything that is tagged with one of the narrower subject headings as well. Okay. So if you don't choose to click any of these, you can just go ahead and add to the search builder like that. You'll see myocardial infarction in quotation marks and then with this MeSH in brackets after. And that means it's going to only bring back things that are specifically tagged with this subject heading. And if we wanted to, we could go ahead and search PubMed at this time. But just as an example, if we did want to pick one of these subject headings, so I'm going to say veterinary and then add to search builder, we see this myocardial infarction, then slash veterinary, and again within quotation marks, and then and with this bracket, MeSH in brackets after it. And then if we do restrict to MeSH major topic, it's going to look like that with the MAJR instead of the MeSH in brackets. And if we say do not include MeSH terms found below it and add that, then instead we get this MeSH and then colon no explode to sort of specify that you don't want to include the things underneath. When you do include it, it's usually referred to as exploding it, but that's the default setting here. So all of these options will change how many results you get. So they can be useful to play around with. Sometimes some of the subheadings might be really helpful. But so in this case, we'll just play around to restrict to MeSH major topic. We're going to say, going to pick the veterinary, add to search builder, and then search PubMed. So we get 57 results. So it's a pretty sort of focused set. And just as an example, if we hadn't included the subject of the subheading of veterinary, we would get way more results. And then if we change it from major to just regular MeSH, we should get even more still. So that's the basics of how to navigate and use MeSH headings. I'll just show you it's a quick example because I talked about how you could see it in the article. So I'm just going to pick this article. We're going to scroll down. And this is what I'm talking about in terms of the MeSH terms showing up on the article level. And you'll see we have some with subheadings, so physiology, surgery, complication. But here we have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 with this asterisk. So these are considered the major topics, the major headings for this article. So, and that's another way you can find MeSH terms. If you don't want to start with the MeSH database, you can look for articles that look relevant and then see what MeSH terms have been associated with it. And then if you want to, if you left click, you have the option to search in MeSH for that subject heading if you want to get back to that screen specifically for, in this case, blood pressure, or you can add it to the search and you'll see it added up there above in the search. So that's just the basics of MeSH. I hope that was helpful.